Building Amendment Bill number 4, third reading.
Call on Government Order of the Day number 5.
Financial Reporting Bill, committee stage.
I declare the House in committee for consideration of the Financial Reporting Bill. Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Speaker. Honourable members, the House is in committee. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou, kātoa. And I haven't called you yet. The House is in committee on the Financial Reporting Bill, and the question is that Part 1 stand part. It's debate on clauses 3 through to 9.
Mr. Chair.
I call the Honourable Clayton Cosgrove.
Mr. Chair, it is a pleasure to have a speech in the House, sir, when you, such a venerable individual with such great experience, is in the chair. This is one of those rare moments in this Parliament, colleagues, where both sides agree on a pretty substantial bill, one that is designed to, on the one hand, create a high degree of transparency for business where it is needed, and on the other hand, where it is needed and where it is in the public interest, but also not be so burdensome and onerous, especially those smaller enterprises, depending on their agreement in terms of compliance costs. And I refer to Part 1 in terms of the purpose, sir, Clause 3, the purpose clause, where it talks about various standards, the financial reporting standards, auditing standards and assurance standards. And we agree, and we will be supporting this bill. It is appropriate. The aims are trying to streamline reporting procedures, cut compliance costs, bring together a whole series of principles which will aid business but also aid those who are attempting to get information from business. But could I touch just for a moment, sir, given the nature of the purpose clause, where it talks repeatedly about standards and where it talks about, in this part, transparency? Because we agree that this is a good bill. The Labour Party has contributed admirably to this bill. But we question a couple of things. We agree and we know the government has acted in good faith in terms of its promotion of standards and transparency within this piece of legislation. But I've got to say, sir, in stark contrast to a number of other issues around standards and lack of transparency or lack of standards that this government has been involved in. Whether it be the financial deals around Rio Tinto, where $30 million was given away to a multi-billion-dollar multinational company, allegedly to protect jobs, a botched negotiation where no security was asked or guarantees were sought to protect those jobs, and we found out, of course, that the minister in charge of those negotiations, the Honourable Bill English, Minister of Finance, did not have the intelligence to even ask for a guarantee around those jobs. Low standard, low transparency, in fact very little transparency around that deal, as they firstly left it to the Meridian Board and then they leapt over the top of the Meridian Board without actually telling them they were doing a side deal, and gave away not only the kitchen sink but the kitchen as well. $30 million thrown in for zero gain. So when it comes to issues of standards and transparency, we are glad that this bill, that these principles are right up front in this piece of legislation, but I would hope that the Minister might have a word with his colleagues in other portfolios to bring the same level of standards and transparency to other parts of this government. If we look at other transactions, Solid Energy, completely asleep at the wheel. No transparency around the fact that that company was driven into the ground by this government, because this government will have no transparency, no ministerial inquiry, no select committee of inquiry, all blocked. The last port of call, thank goodness, we live in hope, is the Auditor General, who's still looking at the need for an inquiry. But again, no transparency, no standards, No standard of behaviour around that particular transaction. We look at the Chorus transaction. Again, done behind closed doors, botched, very low standard there, botched completely, absolutely stuffed up to the point where the government, rather than... Well, that was, for those the uninitiated, the Venus flytrap of the New Zealand Parliament, one Maggie Barry, who every time she's sort of, and that interjection may well have been sponsored by Jim Beam and Johnny Walker, I do not know. It is late at night, sir. But as I was saying, so it may be too close to the fertiliser, the nitrogen or the compost, who knows, sir. Gardening leave is appropriate. Actually, gardening leave is appropriate, sir, as we talk about the lack of transparency around solid energy, because we know that the CEO has sent on a lot of gardening leave for a long time, on about 300 or 400k, something I suggest that member on her salary of, what's an MP salary, 150 odd, has actually been on gardening leave since she's been elected in this place. But anyway, getting back to the bill, sir, because it is appropriate, as the sort of the sort of budgie chirps away in the background over there. That was a botched negotiation, sir. We moved to Chorus, of course, no transparency or high accounting standards around that deal, sir. None at all. Zero, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, no transparency around that deal, to the point where the government is in such a bind that it won't, even though it's the bastion of the private sector, it won't actually look at enforcing the contract as you would in a private sector situation. Last time I checked, when you negotiated better than the other bloke and you won the deal and the other bloke or other person or other party couldn't come up with the goods, you enforced the contract. You didn't wave the white flag of surrender and say you'll bail them out or nationalise them or take an equity stake or interfere with the regulatory process in respect of the Commerce Commission. But oh no, these guys do anything. These guys do anything. And we'd like some transparency. We'd like some transparency, even from old Venus at the back. We'd like some transparency, sir, around those sorts of transactions as well. That's what we'd like, some transparency and standards. Because the difficulty with this legislation, even though it is good legislation, sir, is that this Parliament comes to, can be seen by those in the commercial sector to pontificate to them about the standards they should adhere to and the levels of transparency they should adhere to, but the government does not practice in other areas what they preach. I think you might have to get the Zambucks for that member, sir. She may need a wee bit of help.
Order.
But I say this, sir. Keep going. It's great. It shows that member for the inept member she is. Even this late at night, people will be picking up on that. So, sir, this is a good piece of legislation. It actually deals with cutting down, sir, many of the compliance costs that... Sorry? Oh, that's a brilliant interjection. That's an intellectual effort from somebody who's been too close, I think, to a variety of garden substances over the years. But it's all right, sir. I don't need protection from her. Good God, help me if I did. Sir, the interesting thing I want to touch on, sir, is in respect of charities. Now, the Select Committee spent quite a bit of time, sir, looking at the level of compliance that charitable organisations would have to go to. And to be fair to both sides, we looked at this with a great deal of seriousness, because we didn't actually want to, while we wanted a generic set of standards and standards to apply to financial information in accordance with general accepted accounting practice, and currently there are no requirements for the content of this financial information, we were, and I know the Minister appreciates this, we were very careful to look that we were not burdening or requiring an onerous set of arrangements in respect of charities, given the nature of the work they do. And they are not businesses, they raise money for good causes, and many of those charities, members of Parliament on all sides are involved in, and we didn't want money going in an onerous way, sir, from the public good, if you like, into a myriad of sort of bureaucratic and administrative compliance costs. And I think, sir, it does strike the right balance. I think we had very good feedback from submitters in the charitable sector, but it is an area that I think many of us on both sides were concerned about. Public money, private money, and charitable money, of course. There are 3 different pots there, and there is a requirement and a high requirement on each of those areas in our community to have appropriate financial records and appropriate standards. My hope is that these financial standards, sir, will embolden people to increase their donations to the charitable sector, knowing, of course, that there is belt and braces, knowing that donations indeed, knowing that there is belt and braces and appropriate financial standards and transparency around the charitable sector, as there generally is even prior to this bill, and that gives people the confidence to give, hopefully, in a greater way, and to support those entities in a greater way. I'd be interested if the Minister's prepared to make a couple of comments of reassurance, perhaps, around that charitable sector, to get on the record what exactly we are striving for and to give some confidence to that sector. There is very little, if any, politics in this bill, because it does have, sir, bipartisan support. So I look forward to the committee stage as we work our way through this legislation, the purpose clauses and the other clauses. I know my colleague Dr Clark will have some interesting comments to make in respect of the IRD and their role in this, and I look forward to some of the very interesting comments of members opposite, sir. I'm sure they'll make a wonderful contribution, as they have had in the preemptive stages of this piece of legislation, rather than sort of making the odd inane comment as a few vapours whiz through past the back row over that side, sir. I'm sure it's a long night tonight, but I think we should give this bill due consideration, and we should act in an appropriate way to support this legislation, given that it amends around 80 Acts. I look forward to this debate continuing.
I call the Honourable Shane Jones.